Okay, are you ready for the future? Jim Brown, are you ready for the future, my friend?
I am ready. I'll be 81 years old in May, Steve, and I've seen quite a bit of change in the world, but nothing like we're going to talk about today for a variety of reasons. The future is coming on far beyond our imagination just a few years ago. So I hope I'm going to be around a long, long time to enjoy some of the things I anticipate and some of the things we'll talk about today.
Absolutely. So basically, the show today is entitled "From the Pandemic to the Future," and as you know, you and I did a show about a year ago when the pandemic just started. We talked about, gee, what do we expect to happen? And I think a lot of things actually came to fruition. Let me do this. Let me share this with some people. Number one, if they have anything that they want to talk about, if they want to stream, contact us. If they want to comment. So here I'm going to like put a comment here. To comment, just jump in, and it should appear on the screen. There you are. Want to comment, jump in. So wherever you are, if you want to go comment, I'll get the comment and I'll put it up. Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool. Quite a transition change over us starting this show a few years back where we do occasional interviews. And just in the last 2 years, look how technology has brought us into such a current, much more interactive role.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you have anybody have a comment or a question, go ahead and just post it, and we'll go ahead and put it up. So let's first talk about. Let me go here for a second, and I'm going to what Jim. I let me just do a little background to introduce you a little bit better, and that is obviously you were Secretary of State of the state of Louisiana, insurance commissioner, a state senator. You were in public office for 28 years, if I'm not mistaken. You're currently a publisher, and you publish a number of books dealing specifically with Louisiana, including recent one of your recent books. And you have a website, jimbrownla.com.
Right.
Did I leave anything out?
No, you've covered the gamut pretty well. I still practice a little law, but basically I enjoy working with those who have a book in them, who want to write a book, or who've written a book to get it published. And we're sure doing a lot of that right now with the pandemic, with more people staying home. There are more people who are writing books or have ideas about books, and my mail has increased dramatically. So I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Steve. And as you said, my website's jimbrownla.com. And I've enjoyed staying in touch over all these years. And Mike, let me give you a little introduction about where we're going today to put in perspective, since you mentioned public office.
Go ahead, please.
I was first elected to the state Senate in 1971. Then I was Secretary of State for 8 years. Then I ran for governor of Louisiana. When I ran for governor of this state, there were no fax machines. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. None of that existed. Now, can you go back and think right now, all you people watching this, if you had to carry on your world with sending a document through the mail, the only way to get it to them, where you didn't have any cell phones, you had to do a landline. When I ran for governor of Louisiana, I'd see a filling station on the road with a payphone, and I'd stop to make a few calls on the payphone. Always had lots of quarters in my pocket because I had to have those in the payphone. Well, look how life has changed so much for all of us since I ran in 1987. Even when I was insurance commissioner, we had cell phone technology, but nothing like we have now. Didn't have the high-speed internet. I had some emails going on that my office would open and print for me because I wasn't adept enough to be able to read those emails. So I'm just saying how life has changed so much up to the pandemic. And we'll talk in this show about how life has changed during the pandemic. But I just want to give a little background as to what I've seen in the time I was in public life and in my years of being a close observer of the social mores and the focus of how we operate in this state, in this country, and in our world.
Absolutely. So about a year ago, as we talked about, we're dealing with the beginning of the pandemic. And what I've done is I've put together some videos here. I'm gonna play this one, just a little bit of it, and we'll talk about it. Again, anybody have a question, go ahead and please go ahead and ask your question. So here, let me go and do this. And
COVID-19 has reshaped the world in ways that will endure long after the pandemic ends. Remote work is here to stay. E-commerce is soaring. Automation is accelerating. Our research indicates that the mix of available jobs will change as a result.
Okay, I'm going to just pause it right there if you don't mind. And anybody have a question, go ahead and ask the question. They're talking about, obviously, e-commerce. They're talking about some of the changes. Was there anything there that kind of struck you as you watched it?
Well, I did, and I'll give you my observations, and I'd be interested in seeing what any of our listeners might think about this. I don't think the pandemic by itself made radical changes in how we operate. The video we just said talked about e-commerce, how you go on the internet to buy things, what Amazon has done in terms of purchasing and Walmart, sources like that, how you work from home so much more. I think that these things were going to come anyway. Often they're more efficient, and we've seen the demise of many small stores because of Amazon and the internet. But that was going to come anyway. I just think what happened was the pandemic speeded it up by 15 or 20 years. So we're much more into the whole flow. When I was in public life, I had lots of employees working for me. And I also was the senior partner of a major law firm over in Dallas, Texas, one of the largest in the country. Lots of employees. If someone talked about working from home, I said, no, you don't want to work from home, or we can't allow that because you can't monitor that kind of thing. It's very hard to keep an eye on people. Would they take advantage of it? Well, now the pandemic has forced us to let many of our employees work from home. And what I'm hearing, what they're finding out is they're doing a pretty good job. They're very efficient, and it's not really costing employers any money. They're saving money because they don't have to pay the rent for the office space, that kind of thing. And there's a much more focus in terms of working from home or in remote locations. And then what that means is, how will that affect the downtown areas with huge concentrations of office space? That's going to change. You're not going to have that demand for office space for people working remotely. So there's a huge disruptive change going on. The pandemic was the fuse that got it going. I just would argue that most of the changes would have come. The pandemic just made it happen more quickly, quite frankly, Steve. You're going to see even some other examples. I spent an hour and 15 minutes at the post office today to mail 2 little packages. The line was tremendous. Friday afternoon, there weren't enough employees. And I just cursed under my breath, said, man, if I can avoid the post office, I'm going to go to FedEx or something like that. And so it just shows more and more the demise of the post office. We're seeing all this radical change take place, and the pandemic gave it a kick. But again, it was going to happen. It was inevitable, as most of it was going to happen anyway.
Okay, so I have a question here. Let's see. I'm not sure it's relevant, but I'm going to put it up anyway. Do you support ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting, Louisiana RCV, has been used by Louisiana military personnel since 2016 and will be used for campus elections at LSU beginning 2021. So that's, I think, somebody from my Louisiana politics group. Ranked choice voting, do you support it? You're former Secretary of State. Are you familiar with the ranked choice voting?
As you said, I was the chief elections officer of Louisiana for
Yeah.
8 years. I think Vermont uses ranked choice voting. There's one state that does that, and other people are trying it. The jury's still out to me on ranked choice voting, because I like to pick my candidate, and then if my candidate loses, I want to hear a healthy debate from the other candidates. And when you rank choice, there's no runoff. You're just going to have the the person with the highest number. There's runoff, and you add up your second choices and third choices. And I may not have a first or second, rather, I may not have a second or third choice. Rather than doing along that way, what I did when I was back in 1976, when I was a state senator, I introduced a bill calling for none of the above. If you didn't like any of the candidates, you could vote none of the above. And if none of the above got a majority, you had to have an election again. So there's a number of ways to skin that cat, but I like the way of being able to pick my choice and focus on that choice. And then if that doesn't work out, let's see the two people in the runoff. So I'm not saying I would never go with a plan like that, Steve, but right now I'd rather keep the present system in place. Now, you may argue this, particularly because of what happened in the presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
We have a closed primary in Louisiana. We're the only state that has what we call this jungle primary, where everybody runs in the same election. Then the top two, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever, ends up running it off. I kind of like the old way, where the Republicans get together and have a runoff and pick their choice, and you knew that political philosophy, and then you got the Democrats doing the same thing, and then if an independent wants to run, they can. So I'm more intrigued with the closed primary idea and none of the above as alternatives versus ranked voting.
Okay, so let me just follow up with that and say that, look, obviously we had a horrible situation with the elections, and we'll go into the politics aspect of it. But since you were ahead of elections, going forward, I mean, the pandemic changed things, and what it did was it expedited the need in some states to vote in a different way. That is, to vote by mail. Pretty soon, I think, is going to be vote by electronically, although there's still issues there in terms of security. And after what happened and the scares associated with that, I'm not so sure we're going to get there anytime real soon. But the pandemic really had an impact. Number one, legislatures had to shuffle. Maybe they shuffled too much and too fast for some, but those are the kind of things that were impetus to real change, just in the political realm. Any thoughts?
Well, sure. Things have changed dramatically. I know when I was Secretary of State, to give you how the system used to play, Steve, the law said that unless you were out of state, you had to vote only on election day. I was a Secretary of State. My home is Faraday, Louisiana, up across the river from Natchez, Mississippi. So in order for me to vote, I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, drive up to Faraday, be there when the polls open at 6, cast my ballot, visit with some old friends who were the commissioners there for a bit. I took them a box of donuts. I was on my way, and hightailed it back to Baton Rouge to run the election process because I couldn't absentee vote. Today, almost half the people in Louisiana went and absentee voted, went into advance, voted by mail. So we're changing all over the country. 2 comments to you. First of all, in terms of infiltration and voter security. Look, I still know many of these the secretaries of state who run the elections. There was minimal problems. There's always a few problems, but minimal efforts to buy votes or rig the machines or something along that line. Challenge after challenge is put into the federal courts. None of them went anywhere. So the election went off pretty easily. And yes, it's got to be reviewed and build in security devices in terms of over the internet. But if I'm voting from one location, it seems like we can build in some safeguards where in this day and age, you can vote with a certain code wherever you want. Look, I can do my banking and put all my life savings online, and that's not a problem, apparently. I can buy purchases. I can buy a car online, and there's been no huge complaints of security breaches. So if you can run every aspect of your life online except voting, I think there's a way to make that work. It's got to be flushed out a little bit more, but I think we'll see that coming in the next few years, Steve.
Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to play this a little bit more. Bear with me.
More than 100 million workers in our focus countries, or 1 in 16, may need to switch occupations by 2030. Job growth will be more heavily concentrated in high-skill jobs, while middle and low-skill jobs decline. The explosion in e-commerce set off a scramble for warehouse workers that is unlikely to stop. Investment in the green economy will increase the need for wind turbine technicians.
Okay, so I think there's a lot there. Talk about green technology. They talked about change of jobs. I read something just the other day where basically the job situation is going to radically change. I mean, just say in Louisiana, you take for an example, President Joe Biden right now. I mean, with the change of the oil and gas leases, I mean, that's had a tremendous impact. It will have a tremendous impact on jobs here in Louisiana and elsewhere. But there's also the green technology promise, and people are complaining, but there's the future. Thoughts?
Well, you're right in terms of the changing technology. It used to be, I'd call my plumber if there was a problem, and the plumber would come in with his wrench and fix my pipes. Now, a plumber and any number of jobs. I'll give you one example. I took my car to get fixed the other day, and it's not a major dealer repair shop. It's just a guy that has a repair shop he started. He's looking to hire 5 or 6 mechanics, but if they don't have computer experience, he doesn't want to do them. They got to be computer savvy. That's where we failed miserably in Louisiana. There's a senator in Baton Rouge named Cleo Fields introduced a bill saying kindergarten should be mandatory in Louisiana. We're so far behind in early childhood learning in this state. We failed miserably in terms of getting our young people in to start early in their education, to teach them how to deal with computers at an early age, supplying cheaper computers that can't afford it. And so as a consequence, we don't have a trained workforce, quite frankly. We do a poor job of retraining in our trade schools to help these people find these other jobs. And so you're right, the green industry, things like wind out in the Gulf, there's going to be so many alternatives, and it's going to happen regardless. When General Motors has announced and a number of other car dealers have announced that they're going to quit making gasoline run cars in a matter of years, then you can scream and holler all you want about the oil and gas industry in Louisiana, but it's going to slow down in any event because of the lack of demand for oil and gas. So we've got to be adept and be able to move. And quite frankly, our educational establishment has not served us well in terms of getting in early learning changes. This crazy fight with charter schools where parents want to come in and take control and give their kid a better education, opposed by so many in the public school industry. We are just, we've got blinders on. We're way behind. We're living in the Middle Ages of education reform. And that's why Alabama, that's why Tennessee, Georgia, states like that back in the 40s and 50s were behind Louisiana. We've just relied on oil and gas. We've not done the training and education, and they're way ahead of us now. That's where the Nissan plants are going and the Toyota plants are going. They're not coming to Louisiana. So at some point, we got to wake up and not smell the roses, but smell the opportunity for educational reform that's got to take a huge jump start in our state. Until we do, Steve, you're right. We're not going to have the trained workforce to be competitive with so many other states that are making those changes.
So let me ask you this. I mean, Louisiana is so far behind in terms of green technology. And I mean, what can we do in the state of Louisiana? You know, you ran for governor. What that was 88.
Good gosh, how many years?
80, yeah. So and at the time you wrote the Brown papers. Was part of your campaign. I'm just wondering if you were to write the Brown papers now, and how much would you promote green technology, given that we're in Louisiana?
I jumped on it. Texas is way ahead of us in terms of wind. We've got our access to the Gulf, that's wind there, the use of water, solar. There are all these other alternatives. And you see, we've got some pretty good technology experts at LSU, at Tulane, at Southern, our various universities. But state government doesn't call on these people. State government gives someone a civil service job, paying them $80,000 a year, and say, you go solve our economic woes. We don't bring in the private sector to help us solve these problems like other states do. So that's why I say we're really missing out on educational opportunities here. So, and by the way, the Brown papers, I've read those over, and most of what I wrote back in 1987 is still current today. Getting rid of all these locked-in funds in the Constitution. Parr called for an abolishment of all those special funds in the Constitution as a way of helping our budget. That's what I proposed back in 1987. I'm glad to see that Parr, 27 years later, is picking up on my idea there, Steve. So most of those ideas, 4 boards for higher education, how ridiculous. The states that are really progressive in higher education, North Carolina, California, New York, where all your fine universities are, got 1 board, not 4 boards. 4 boards mean you splitter it all up, politics gets into it. Just a terrible idea. But there's been no real major effort to deal with issues like that. And that's what's holding us behind.
So we have a question here from Facebook. By the way, we're streaming this right now on 3 locations on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. I can stream up to like 8 different locations at once. And so I can, get questions like this one here. Can come in from Twitter, can come in from YouTube. All they have to do is comment and I'll see it. So we have this question: what is the 2021 Louisiana budget allocation for public schools? Any idea?
I don't know the exact dollar figure, but I can tell you now it's a lump sum that's divided up by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Big elections coming up in March for some of those positions, by the way. But the allocation isn't important as much as the priorities. There is very little funding for early childhood training, for example, early childhood education. There's not enough. $30-40 million, I'm guessing. It's just a drop in the bucket as to what we should be spending there. In charter schools, often are school boards lobbied by teachers' unions and by teachers' groups, often don't give charter schools the proper allocation. So I think the money is there. And if you look as compare on a per capita basis with many other school systems in the state, you will see that we've got a fair amount of money out there. Sure, you can always use more, but I don't think it's money as much as it is the allocation of those funds. So that's the weakness. I can't give you a dollar figure.
Sure.
But again, I've always seen that the dollars were there. Sure, you need more money, but if you can't get more money, then how you set priorities and allocation. And that's where we've not done a very good job, quite frankly, Steve.
Okay, so let me play this for a second.
Will increase demand for nurses, home health aides, and hearing aid technicians.
Increase home health aides. What do you think? I mean, the baby boomers are getting old. So we're going to increase all this health care, for them. I mean, what's
the same argument, Steve, that we make when it comes to working from home? You can do it a lot cheaper from home, where you don't have to build in the infrastructure. I had the COVID. I had it back in December. I had a serious problem with the COVID. I went in the hospital for a while. And so I had home health care when I came out, and I was able to do it from home. And they said, well, we want you to go into the physical plant, to the on-site allocation. Well, there you had all kinds of administrative personnel. You had to have the physical plant. They were paying rent or buying buildings, all the equipment. I tried all their equipment out, and I'm glad I was available to me. But at home, we got very creative with the straps. The Tom Brady straps that he uses, doesn't use weight, use straps. And I did a good job of rehabilitating at home. So sure, we've got to do that kind of thing. Having in-house caregivers to help our elderly, rather than just dumping them in nursing homes like we have for so many years. So it comes down to a question of the cost generation, because we just can't afford to continue. As you said, Steve, you made the observation, our baby boomers are getting older. They need more and more health care, but we've got to be as flexible as we can and use someone in the home element with maybe it's not even a trained nurse, but it's a nurse practitioner or it's a nurse helper who comes by to be sure you're getting your medicine and taking the right dose and that kind of thing. A lot of that could cut down on the cost of our medical care in this country. That's just astronomical, quite frankly.
Okay. So again, make your comments or ask your questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and post it. We'll put it up. If you want to make a comment, go ahead and do that. We'll put that up also. We'd love to hear from you. We're here with Jim Brown, and we're talking about pandemic to the future. And we've talked already about a little bit about education, about the elections, voting type situation, the changes that were made because of the pandemic. We talked a little bit just now about healthcare and the baby boomers who, an incredible population, large population, which is beginning in terms of numbers are beginning to decline. Yet, the focus is going to be on home health care. Again, anybody have a comment, please go ahead and pitch in. We'd love to hear from you. Home health care, let me throw some out to you. One of the major changes that have taken place, and I'm going to just put this up real quick. And let me go and share this. Okay, is this here. The rise of telemedicine and the need to move care closer to communities, the likelihood of future viruses, and the change of infrastructure. Telemedicine, my gosh, thankfully, the Trump administration changed the law. They made it easier they expedited telemedicine, so that if you want to be able to see a doctor online of certain type of practices, you can do so. I did it. I just had to test it out, particularly because I didn't want to go to the hospital because I was concerned about COVID and maybe catching it there. But the technologies that are now available of being able to be able to communicate with not just one doctor, but a battery of doctors to get psychiatric assistance. The rules are changing so quickly. Look, can you go ahead and let me throw some out to you in terms of where the laws would change and how we have to keep up with the changing of technologies in the law. For example, just telemedicine. What laws are going to have to change because of telemedicine? Suppose you want to see. Suppose you can't get a psychiatrist visit here in Louisiana, so you want to see somebody online, and through telemedicine who lives in New York State. does the state of Louisiana have to change their laws now for prescribing medicine, for prescribing, to administer, put somebody into the hospital? These are things that, the medical community, I think, they're definitely going to have to deal with. The legal community have to deal with. Jim, you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do, Steve. I went to see my dermatologist. I get checked over once a year. And I said, do you do much over the internet? She says, yes, I do. We do a lot of that kind of thing. But it's in the time of COVID, we see lots of patients that way. I says, well, one of the reasons I was reluctant is that, I hate to abuse my privilege of you as a doctor because you don't get paid. She says, oh, yes, we do. They changed that because of the COVID in the last year. If we do a call over Zoom, over Skype, something like that, we can bill the insurance company for that. So that's an important change, quite frankly, to where the system, the insurance groups are much more willing to do over the internet, and they're doing the kind of thing we're doing here now because they can get paid for it. So that's an important change, quite frankly, that I've noticed here. Now, it's been put in place because of COVID. Will that continue? The jury is still out on that. Will Medicare still give reimbursements for the online calls? And that's something we just don't know. But quite frankly, it's made medicine much more accessible. Now, can a doctor in New York write a prescription in Louisiana? Right now, the answer is no. But the whole idea of crossing state lines is something we're going to see more and more challenges to. I was insurance commissioner also for 12 years in Louisiana. Insurance is regulated state by state. Well, in this day and age of commerce, when companies operate in numerous states, it seems ridiculous to have those barriers state by state setting up insurance-wise. We saw the whole flow of energy. Energy is an important right for us to survive. Look at the terrible situation that's happened over in Texas, when for almost a week, 14 million people didn't have electricity and the temperature is down to in the teens. Well, Texas regulates their own insurance in a free market time situation, and look at the disaster that's happened. So there should have been some way where electricity from Arkansas, and not Louisiana because we needed ours, but other states could have gotten in there, and that has to be coordinated on a federal level. So my point is, doctors writing prescriptions over state lines is one more issue that we need to address in 2021 and not operate in a 19th century mentality.
Okay. Those people watching or now or in the future, if you are interested in doing a program like this to stream, contact us. Just go on Facebook and send a message to me, looking for different ideas for programs dealing with the future, dealing with elections, dealing with politics. Or let's say you just have a business and you're interested in doing this, in streaming and getting it done professionally. So contact us. Let's see. Let me go back here. We're going to go to this little thing. And we talked about telemedicine. Let me go back. So this is from TechCrunch. 10 investors predict, now get this, on-demand delivery, the electronic vehicles will dominate mobility's post-pandemic future. Now, this is a picture, basically the article's on TechCrunch, and the issue is, the mobility, people now having these electronic cars, people having these electronic bikes, and going from grocery stores, the type of things that we're now seeing for delivery services. This is a gigantic business opportunity. Any thoughts about that?
Well, you're right in terms of the whole delivery mechanism. It could be by helicopter. Sure. Is being explored right now. Driverless cars, all types of delivery options. I thought it was radical just a few years back. My daughter lives in Tribeca, New York City. And she went and had an agreement. They put it in writing with the local grocery store she did business with. She'd go online the night before, do all of her ordering. Not only would it be delivered, because that happens in many communities, but the delivery guy was bonded. He would go right into her home, put the stuff in the refrigerator and in the pantry. She didn't even put up her groceries. Now, I thought that was pretty radical a few years back, but as you said, now letting electronic cars and vehicles bring it to you where there's no person there at all is coming, and is certainly going to provide a real interesting change where you can order and have things like that delivered and not have a live person involved in the process. So that's not new. It's happening more and more all over the country. Amazon is driving much of it because they're looking at cheaper ways to deliver. Steve, I think it's amazing how it works today. We're moving into a new home, and I ordered maybe 200 boxes to store my various goods in for the movers to come in. I ordered them on last Tuesday from out of state. I think I'm kind of thinking Alabama. I'm not sure exactly, but it was not in Louisiana. The whole 200 boxes were delivered by Amazon the next morning. I ordered them at 4 p.m, and the next morning I had the 200 boxes from out of state. So we're making magnificent progress in terms of that whole flow. And again, it's just one more factor in how we're changing and moving into the 21st century. And again, it's not just the pandemic. Most of this would have come anyway, but the pandemic is moving it up and making it happen much more quickly.
Okay, my friend Trey Mushian, and Trey, I apologize if I said your name wrong. We talk all the time on Facebook, and I never did ask you how to say your name. Mushian, he's an attorney, retired attorney, I believe. Asked the question: what do you think Snooty Biden's position? And by the way, he's teasing about Snooty, but he's asking position on opening schools. Is he being too deferential to the CDC? Let me flip that question a little bit and try to tie it into the topic of this moment, which is dealing with the future, and that is that schools. I mean, obviously, we have the immediate problem that Trey is talking about: opening schools, the CDC, the role of CDC, the power of the CDC, the power of the president. Whether or not the people will listen to the president or the CDC. But then we have the more futuristic problem, which deals with how do we deal with education in once we kind of get out of the pandemic. I mean, we now have got a way to do things. I know that people want to learn in school, but my gosh, you can now do so much more online. I mean, I think you can. Go ahead.
Well,
answer the question, the Biden question.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've got 7 grandchildren, all that are operating primarily online. And the overall consensus of the parents, of the kids themselves, and of the teachers dealing with them is that they're not getting the same education they would if they were doing it in school, face to face, the interaction, the friendships kids are missing out on. So the overwhelming consensus I hear, it's much better to be in a physical environment than try to do it online. So if you do homeschooling, those parents are geared up and have studied and worked with other parents. And if you haven't had that background, then it's very difficult to deal online. Regarding the question about being too differential to the CDC, that's a tough one because we just don't know. We don't have the history. We don't have the studies in terms of the virus to see what's going to happen. Look, you're talking to a guy that spent 12 days in intensive care in the hospital.
Wow.
And I did it because, and I think I did it because I went to a political gathering where all these big shot politicians didn't wear a mask and came up to me. I tried to keep my distance. I went down there to deliver a friend to do the cooking and stayed around, and I shouldn't have done it. I should have gotten out of there because I got the virus and I have really suffered because of it. So when the medical professionals say, give us a recommendation, and they've got the facts to back it up, I'm one to weigh on the side of listening. And let me tell you about this. And Trey, this is not reflective of your question, but I have people come and say, well, listen, it's just my right to decide whether to wear a mask or not. Well, look, what about my right for you not to be in my face in a restaurant or in a store or something like that? When you're getting in my face, you see, you are a danger to me because you're emanating through your breath the virus that causes me great anger. I lost a brother-in-law, by the way.
I was just going to raise
virus. And so I don't buy that argument at all, the freedom of choice. It's my freedom of choice for you to stay out of my face. So get the heck out of my face and don't give me that argument about not wearing a mask. The literature and the medicine seems to say that if you wear a mask and keep your distance and use good common sense, you're going to be okay. But we don't know, Steve. We just don't have the history. We don't have the medical history in a lot of these issues. And so until we have more history, I think we need to move very cautious. All my gang wants to go back to school. I've got some grandkids I had a grandson that went back to school. His teacher got the virus. So now he's out of school for 2 weeks. So it's just a tough situation. And every parent has to use what they think is good common sense in making the decisions of what they do with their kids. Again,
if you have any questions or want to make a comment, go ahead and under the video here, just go ahead and plug it in. We'll put it up.
I'm someone kicked in the door, so you're drinking here at 5. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock. It's tea time for me. I went to school in England. I have a cup of tea at 5 o'clock every day. I've got my little crumpet, my little biscuits, and I've got tea is what I'm drinking. I'm not drinking alcohol to put up with you, Steve.
Right. I'm the one that's got the alcohol right here in the bottle. So actually, water. So let's do this for a second. Let me go here. Bear with me. Okay, we've looked at that for a second, and we've looked at this slide, looked at that slide. So I wanted to show you this Twilio, and I'm going to show you a little bit about Twilio in a second, talking about the future and communications. Twilio is now worth, according to Bloomberg, $67 billion, up from just $10 billion from March 16 of last year. And here's how it's preparing for a post-pandemic future. Do you know anything about Twilio?
I don't. No, I do not.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and change gears for a second, and I'm going to put.
Let me say, hard for me to believe a company would go 6 times in a matter of just a matter of
Zoom,
not even a full year. That's
yeah.
So I hope there's no GameStop mentality involving a Twilio, but it must be going forward to increase that much.
So here, let me go ahead and play this.
They expect you to do it in your app, your website, and across devices, using text messages and video, through Facebook Messenger and in chat windows, with bots or live agents. 2 billion people use WhatsApp. Are you engaging your customers there? To reach your customers, you need to be on these channels securely and around the globe. But how do you make that happen on your own? Facing a complex maze of thousands of carriers, global regulations, networking gear, old protocols, expensive hardware and proprietary software is overwhelming. But the solution is simple: Twilio.
Okay.
Twilio is the cloud communications platform that more than 50,000 companies and over 2 million developers use as their platform for customer engagement, using communication API.
Okay. So I just wanted to give the gist of this and to say, look, what we're talking about here is multi-tier, multi-generation, multi-direction communications. I mean, we whether it's telephone, whether it's online video like this, whether it is Snapchat, all the in any kind of messenger. How do you centralize it all? how do you get your communication so that it hits each person based upon the way they communicate? And so I wanted to bring it up. Not that I have anything to do with Twilio, because I don't, but it gives you an idea, I think, hopefully, that, this thing is just really taken off and it's a pandemic that obviously we talked about March. It's gone up by 4 times, to 65 billion. That's an extraordinary Zoom. And they have programs that are, I think, better than Zoom. And I was probably the first one to use Zoom in the state of Louisiana, as well as Facebook Live and Google Hangouts. So here's new technology that is just coming out of nowhere that allows people to do multidiscipline communication. Your thoughts?
Well, Steve, again, it's one more dramatic change we're seeing in a short period of time. You started with Facebook, where you could bring in friends, hopefully those that you could maybe do business with, and that was just kind of an elementary beginning of communication. And then of course, then the old way was you'd put together email lists, spend hour after hour putting email addresses into a vehicle. And you didn't know who you were getting to. And then you've got Facebook getting more specific with its ads, Twitter and other outlets. And it's obvious that there was room for some group to come in and make it much more specific for the company to zero in on their clients, potential clients, and have a vast number of lists they could put together without having hundreds and hundreds of man hours to put it all together. So it makes sense. Obviously, it's successful if they've got 50,000 companies using it, and that value of over $60 billion is driving the company up. So they've got a formula that they're clicking on, and it's going to be great until the next creative idea comes out and someone else gets something else going on that gets more specific. But I'm just amazed at the changing technology. I've seen it with you in terms of this site, with the things we're doing today. And as each month goes by, there's more options, there's more fine tuning. We have the, companies like Twilio, like we talked about, that's available to small companies that can market widespread wise, but pick up more business, something that was very difficult for smaller companies to do before. So the options are out there, and they're going to keep coming. And those that pay attention to it, get on the cutting edge, and maybe you don't need to be a coder, but you certainly need to be current. Sites like yours are a way to use that benefit. And if you don't tune in, then you're going to be irrelevant, quite frankly, in your business. Even if you're a sole practitioner, you're a small businessman or woman. If you're not up on these current ways of communication, you're just going to be irrelevant. That's why we started off our program much earlier, saying how important computer skills are in this day and age.
Absolutely. So we're going to close it up in just a second. So here on here it says, do you want to stream? Contact us. Just send me a message, messenger or an email, Facebook Messenger or Twitter or YouTube. A comment is fine. If you want to do a show like this, if your business wants to get out there and be able to stream and really be able to communicate with others, and then to use the technology in an evergreen way after the fact, after the show is over. So we'd love to hear from you. Secondly, if you have any ideas for any type of show, again, feel free to contact me. Just go ahead and send me a message. I would love to hear an idea of a show. We're going to be talking about the future. Just this was a beginning of that discussion, and I thought it was really interesting. I really loved the conversation. Really, Jim. Let me see. We've had a lot of conversations from different people, Trey and others. So, any last thoughts, Jim? Any last thoughts?
Well, like I say, I think I made that start to say that as many columnists and observers have written, the pandemic has caused a change in how we live. That's true. But most of the changes that we're observing would have taken place not quite so quickly, but in the long run anyway. And it's not going to stop. We're going to see a whole variety of changes, more and more people working from home, ways of making investments. It's just to choose. And I mentioned before how out of touch I was when I ran for governor of Louisiana. And I can just see the next 10 or 15 years going by and seeing more dramatic change. I just hope in 10 or 15 years, Steve, I'm around to see it all.
Yeah, I sure hope that you are, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, and we do this show back up in 2035.
I'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you have any ideas, like I said, if you have any ideas for a show, for future shows, we're going to be talking specifically about real estate, the changes in real estate. We'd like to have some realtors to be able to discuss this with us. Talking about the medical industry. We're going to talk about the downtown industry. What's happening to the CBD, downtown Baton Rouge, downtown Shreveport, downtown New Orleans, downtown Washington, D.C. How is the new world going to change all this? How is it changing it? So we'd like to hear from the experts. We definitely would love to hear from you. Listen, thank you so much. It's been really, really super to hear from you. And let me go and play this to close. I didn't plan on doing this, but go ahead and do it. Huh?
If I just say,
yeah,
that I write about a lot of these ideas, and people can go check them out by going to my website at jimbrownla.com. So lots of interesting ideas I put up there all the time. Hope some of your listeners will tune in and take a look at it.
Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to actually edit this, and we're going to get the transcript and put parts up in different ways based on the subject, put it up on Bayou Buzz, and hopefully you'll be able to do so on your site too, in both text and video form. So I'm going to go ahead and play this real quick. Everybody else, see you next time. And Jim, just hold on for a second, please.